Hey everyone, RogueGold here. Today, as we transition into what is assumedly the final stages of waiting before we enter into this new era of The Division 2, and of course by that I'm referring to the fact that Season 8, which just released in-game this past week, has a shortened calendar of events. I believe, as I've said for quite a while now in my videos over the past few weeks, that we're set to finally get the full reveal and PTS of the upcoming Division 2 content next month in March, and then the update will at last release, likely in late April or early May. Not confirming that that's true, that's just my belief at this point based off of what we're seeing happening, but I digress. Because I believe that time is fast approaching, I had the idea to take a look back in Division's history, and I thought it might be fun to cover some of what my favorite all-time secrets of the franchise have been. As you may be able to tell, I'm way too invested in the Division, and it's been that way for going on 6 years now as of next month, ever since March of 2016. So there are quite a number of secrets and not well-known facts about pieces of content, guns, gear, clothing, etc. that were either never released or modified over time from the version that the majority of you probably know them as. And so, I thought it might be fun to share some of those stories, because I bet the majority of you have not heard of at least one of these 8 bits that I'm going to share today. So let's have some fun, shall we? One thing I wanted to mention before we fully dive in is that I had to draw on the YouTube archive for some of the visual components to some of these items on the list, and so for any footage I display that is not mine, I will credit and leave a link to these people's videos in the description below, and I of course thank them very much for your contribution to this video's engagement and enjoyment factor. I will also note that I will timestamp each of these 8 secret stories in the description, as well as for you to be able to skip around to whichever ones you may not already know. And with that, let's get into this. Starting with, did you know at one point we were going to be able to become assassins in the Division? That's right, way back in the early days of the Division 1, it was planned for them to add a crossover outfit from Assassin's Creed into the game, which you can see on screen here. It's unclear, at least from my recollection and what I looked up in preparation for this video, it's unclear how this person got access to the outfit and whether they permanently got to keep it in the live game, but this outfit was never widely distributed to the player base. It never became publicly available, whereas they did go through with crossover outfits for Splinter Cell and Ghost Recon, and honestly, as different as Division and Assassin's Creed are, I wouldn't have minded this outfit. I think it looks pretty dope. So that's the never released Assassin's Creed outfit from the Division 1. Next up, in the same category, but certainly on the other end of the spectrum, as far as clothing variety goes, we have this absolute beauty of an outfit, the data mined but never released bunny costume. I jokingly tweeted out about this thing to Yannick, Pale, and Trick a few months back, casually reminding them that the long-awaited release of this outfit in now the Division 2 would easily make the new update and content a instant success. Obviously, I was joking, but in all honesty, I know some people get very upset when non-tactical clothing gets released in the game. For me, I have zero bother, but with any new clothing that's released, as long as it's supplementary to and not overtaking actual serious, realistic clothing options. And so I would have no issue if they ever did release this thing. I would get a huge kick out of running around with it for a while. There's not much backstory here. It was just data mined in the Division 1, I want to say around the first holiday season after the game was released, so going into 2017. And a lot of people were, assumed once they saw it that they might do like a spring or an Easter event that had this in it. Sadly, that never came. I wish they would do more in-depth seasonal events, but I suppose that's just something that they've never had the time or resources for beyond producing actual new content. Either way, that's the story of the infamous bunny costume. Now let's move on to some actual gameplay stuff, shall we? Beginning with an old favorite from the Division 1, the Banshee gear set. Did you know that it wasn't always going to be called Banshee? That's right, the set was initially going to be called a B.L.I.N.D, which I believe was set to be released alongside 1.3 and the Underground, hence why you received that cool adjacent vanity set from the activity still to date. Its bonuses were originally going to revolve around, you guessed it, blinding people, and they actually had a plan to pair a gear set with a gun for the first time ever, releasing the Urban MDR with a blind damage related talent. Well, obviously that didn't go down, the way that they planned. The MDR stayed in the oven until 1.5 in survival, and we never got any gear set adjacent guns, though they sort of revisited this concept in 1.8 by adding exotic weapon pairs with the Liberator and Centurion and the Devil and Heal. Back to the lore at hand though, Blind didn't make it past the PTS, and it was sent back to be worked on until 1.4, one update later, where it was renamed Banshee. The story does not end there though, because originally Banshee was set to offer you 20% faster movement speed if you were not Rogue. which would have been a huge bonus, and it was on the PTS. And unfortunately, testing uncovered that if used long enough in one direction, down one street for several blocks, the world would begin to be unable to render fast enough, leading to obviously quite a few issues. And so it eventually got changed to the bonus we now know from today, where it became the ultimate rogue hunting set. So yeah, that one was pretty crazy. And it's really interesting, to me at least, how many of these items got rotated in and out as the devs tried to find the right power levels for them. Because then again, in the 1.6 PTS, we'd had another gear set that never ended up seeing the light of day called S.E.E.K.R, which was very similar to B.L.I.N.D. It had a clothing set that was released, but the set itself never made it past testing. And that was mainly because it was the ultimate crutch of a gear set. As you can see right here, it heavily rewarded body shot damage, which paired with the already strong critical hits of the game and just made it a very insane gear set. I believe as the PTS went on, they tried another version which made it so that the 2 consecutive body shots boosted the next damage of your next headshot. So in theory, it was a set that was good for burst weapons, but that didn't really stick either. And so they pulled it from the update. But surprisingly, unlike B.L.I.N.D, it never came back around. Even for update 1.8, which was the largest the game ever saw, it meant that while the Division had nearly a 3-year life cycle, its final gear set to ever release was Defense in update 1.5. So late 2016, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. The madness does not end there, however. The following PTS for update 1.6.1 also hosted an item that never ended up making it to the live servers. This time, it was a weapon named the M249 Saw. Now, to my recollection, unlike the B.L.I.N.D and S.E.E.K.R sets, which had been intended to be released, I believe I recall the devs saying that this M249 variant had accidentally slipped into the PTS, and they either removed it before the PTS ended or just let it play out its course, but this thing was insane. If you search the Division M249 Saw here on YouTube, you'll see a very lengthy gameplay video that Wids made back in the day, where him and his entire group was using it in the DZ, and it just chewed people up. So it wouldn't surprise me if that was the main reason they didn't release it with 1.6.1, on top of the fact that they said it was an accident that it was there in the first place. But similar to S.E.E.K.R, it never ended up releasing, which, at least to me, begs the question of how many guns, gear sets, and, just gear pieces in general were out there in existence, and we just never got to hear about them. I would love to hear about all of those things one day down the road. The next one here is a bit more recent, and some of you may know about this, but I'm not sure that everybody knows the story behind it. If you'll recall, the Division 2's reveal trailer at E3 2019 showcased the main agent as using a lightweight M4 in the majority of the fight, which pleased a lot of people since it was such a strong and popular gun in the Division 1. Well, that satisfaction pretty quickly turned to dismay at launch when we realized that it and the LVOAC had been turned into single-shot rifles instead of the beast full autos that they had once been. Now, some might think that the story ends there, but Frederick Thylander, who used to work on the game as one of the top gameplay developers on the project before being moved over to Star Wars after Warlords of New York's launch, revealed that at the time of the E3 demo, the team hadn't actually conceptualized or even created the rifle weapon class yet, which, beyond the fact that the lightweight and the Lavoa got pulled once it was created, it's kind of wild to think about how the devs created an entire class and talent pool for these weapons in the final months leading up towards launch. So yeah, unfortunate that the top dogs got picked off to be made into single shots, but I'm still hoping out hope that we one day see an exotic fully auto lightweight M4. Moving back in time a little, we now have a major gameplay feature that was once teased for the original game, but then never made it to release. Some of you may know about this one because I believe that Lieutenant Buzz Lightyear did a video showcasing it in the last recent months here, but that is that stealth takedowns were originally planned to be incorporated into the Division 1. You can see in the clip right here that the agent sneaks up behind a rioter and gets the prompt to stun them and then goes to town. Similarly to the last story, Frederick Thylander also was able to provide some clarification on this subject. I believe it was in response to Buzz on Twitter when he made that video, where he elaborated and explained that in order to have any sort of melee combat in a game, you need to create an engaging system around that and ensure that enemies can respond with just as meaningful interactions within the same attack category. And of course, I'm paraphrasing there. And so basically, they didn't have that many ideas on how to design enemy melee beyond just swinging and hitting nearby targets, and so for balance's sake, they removed the ability for players to be able to perform stealth takedowns. definitely would have been cool to see, and who knows, maybe we'll see them return one day in the Division universe's future. And so we come to our last forgotten tale of the Division. Again, this one is probably a bit less obscure than some of the others, but it's one that I personally love, and so I had to include it, and that is the story of Central Park in the Division 1. This gameplay from IGN, where in Division's early days, very early days, they glitched out of the map and trekked far north to see the giant empty fields before DZ North was ever created and implemented. Now, I did this too back in the day, and I intended to include my own footage, but upon going and searching my records, it seems like Xbox has overrode it with other footage, which really sucks. But what was so interesting here, well, there were a couple of things. One, this glitch was possible from multiple spots. The IGN video shows them using the highway on the west end of the map to travel up north and then cut back over, whereas my friend and I, when we did it, we used just a regularly barricaded spot in the upper right corner of the map, and we were just able to shimmy our way through there with some mobile cover. And so plenty of people had their own secret passageways on how to get up there, and it was pretty cool to see. You could even approach the top DZ gates of DZ6 and have the game render you as you were in the dark zone. And so we did this once. You could literally kill players through the fences and earn DZ XP, which is pretty hilarious. But what was so interesting was that Central Park continued to evolve over time, which was why so many people were convinced that we were going to see it one day. It was much later on, I want to say sometime between 1.4 and 1.6, my friend and I found a new way to glitch over there after all those other ones were fixed way back in like 1.1 and 1.2. It was from the Clear Sky Incursion. You could actually just walk down the road, basically, and end up being where DZ7 is now. And whereas in this original footage you see nothing, basically, just emptiness and floating trees, there were, like, carnival tents that had been set up, similar to some of the things you see near Camp Hudson, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm not saying it was fully fleshed out. There was still a fair amount of empty spaces and floating trees, but some of the terrain had been put in, there were tents pitched, the lights were on, and so I and many others really thought that we would end up seeing them add Central Park in as a new zone, or DZ, or Incursion one day, but they never did. And instead, of course, we got the West Side Piers in 1.8, which I actually did get to go and see the battleship when I did my original Central Park visit, but back then the only thing that was there at the time was the ship and a bunch of like shipping containers where the skirmish map ended up. But I suppose that is another story for another video. Thank you all so much for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video, and be sure to subscribe with notifications on so you can be updated every time I upload. I hope you all enjoyed. I thought this sounded like a pretty fun video to dive into the past and pluck a few of my favorite tales out. There's certainly a rich history with this franchise, especially from the perspective of someone who's followed it so closely for, as I said, going on 6 years now, and it's part of why I'm so excited to finally see the next step for this game, franchise, and now universe. So yeah, I'm really stoked, but anyways, let me know your thoughts on all these old stories and secrets from The Division. Which ones did you know? Which ones did you not? And what's your favorite tale of the things that just weren't meant to be? I'll be very curious to hear all of your responses, so be sure to leave them down below. And yeah, everybody, that's going to do it for me today. Once again, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, and until the next one, guys, RogueGold out.